Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to this, and I really wanted to thank Deborah for this amazing project that she's created. There's nothing quite like it, at least in Columbus, and definitely not in Bar Harbor, Maine, although the college I teach at is sort of like this. I also want to thank Sarah. Thank you so much for including my work in the show. This museum's incredibly special to me. I've shown here a lot and spent a lot of time here when I used to live in Maine several years ago. I also want to thank Scout. Thank you for keeping us on task and getting everything done, and Deirdre as well. It's been great reading your books and getting an opportunity to have some conversation with you. Okay, I'm going to turn on my timer because I don't have presenter notes. So here I go. Okay. Oh, no, that's the laser. Okay, so I'm just going to flip through these. This is some of my work. A lot of this work was shown in a Cordoba annual or biennial. I can't remember what it was back then. And then a group show, Big Bang, Abstraction in the 21st Century. And then some other works that were shown around the Boston area when I was showing at Alston Skirt. Just so you get an idea of kind of where I'm coming at. This is older work. The newer work is changed. This was here at the Cordoba on that wall. This is called Menace. There's two different paintings in there. This was another installation that I did, Skirmish, paint on the wall, and then I make these objects and I put the paintings on the wall, and they're very large. That's the painting that was on the wall in that image, that's Charlatan. This is the most recent, and I like to say final installation because these things have become very complicated and they take a long time to do. This is called The Bad Thing. This was at the Beeler Gallery at the Columbus College of Art and Design in a show on installation art, which was a really fun show to be in. That's a detail so that you can kind of see the projections, and then it's all arranged to cast these shadows on the canvas. This is a pretty old painting, but this is, I was thinking about dreams. I don't really dream that much, which was kind of I mean, I know I dream, but I am not very good at recalling them, and I'm not good at practicing a journal. The dog, well, I don't even know if it's a dog. The snout on the left-hand side and this weird kind of geometric, spiral there have something to do with dreaming. And then this is a more recent drawing of a gouache and ink drawing of a giant drawing of a brain. So that's my work, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Wonder Show and the things we've been doing. I started teaching when I moved from Maine College of Art. I was teaching there. We moved to Columbus, Ohio. I was teaching at the Ohio State University, and I was given an opportunity to teach a graduate seminar, which I jumped on, and it was about whatever topic I felt interested in or whatever they thought that they need or I needed. Since I was an alum, I had some time, I came back, and I thought a sense of wonder might be a good thing at OSU because it's an incredibly theoretical program. There's some October people in the art history department. Laura Lisbon is there, my teacher, mentor, friend, who specializes in French modernist and contemporary painting. So it's a very specialist kind of program, and I was curious about wonder, because everybody had been talking about curiosity and wonder in the same breath. And I started realizing that they're very, very different things. They shouldn't be talked about as though they're equal things. So, this is what I call the wonder face. And it includes horror. As you can see, there's the boy from The Shining. The lower left is my son, Emmett, watching an automaton at Shelburne Museum in Vermont, which is a wonder in itself. And then I pulled out a bunch of just Google images, except, again, lower left, the kids in the car finally fell asleep. of people sleeping. And I think the difference between this, I'm thinking about wonder as maybe this waking dream state, where cognitively things shut down, linguistically you don't have the words to describe what happened to you, and for a split second, for a moment, you're lost, in a good way, or perhaps a bad way. And then in sleeping, I like the juxtaposition between the wonder phase, that the eyes open, everything's available in terms of sensory experience. You kind of freeze, there's a kind of paralysis that takes place. With the inner life and the inner workings of dreams. I want to talk about the monsters. I have a lot of things to talk about, so I'm going to just try and fly through here, and then we'll sort things out with the questions. So I'm not interested in monsters per se, and I'm interested in the concept of the monstrous, and I'm as a strategy for dealing with the deaths of painting. The way in which I came about making my work is through strategies and ideas around the grotesque, including the decorative grotesque. When I'm thinking about the monstrous, more and more, I've been thinking about my own relationship with depression, and it's one of those cliches that writers talk about, like write what you know. So I was making up all these kind of imaginary creatures and all these different kinds of kind of footnotes to painting. There's a mashup. It's kind of they're all nods to other paintings or other types or modes of working. So I started thinking about these issues that I deal with every day, and asking myself what's going on inside of my own head when I'm unable to produce work at the rate that I would like to. And so I started researching this, thinking like, okay, I'm going to make a series of paintings on depression, which is what I've been working on now. They're not all black, and they're not all negative. There's a lot of beauty to it as well. But just doing a Google search, like, it's hard to visualize or make an image about this issue. You find a lot of pictures of people holding their heads on Google, if you Google depression. And Durer's Melancholia, and then the Van Gogh as well. This is a great watercolor of the man standing and him being trapped by his own despair. And then we come to the Temptation of St. Anthony, this Bosch detail, him dealing with all his visions and demons. The unknown. We all know this Goya image, one of the great ones. Teach yourself ignorance. This is something I've been trying to have my students embrace in a very significant way as artists, as art students, of not knowing. I mean, going through standardized testing, my children who are 8 and 12, all the kind of the sense of wonder and all of the interest gets kind of squished out of them through all of these testing. So you have to deal with, develop a kind of comfort with ambiguity. And this is Nicholas of Cusa, and if you look at the Wonder exhibition at Mass MoCA in the catalog, there's an interview in there with Lawrence, the great Lawrence Weschler, and he really goes on to expound about Nicholas of Cusa. He's the man that pulled the curtains back on Nick here, and I will let you read that, but it's a pretty interesting idea. And so this is his writing. So if you want to pursue it, there you go. Also, I just came upon this book when I was just Googling ignorance. Routledge. I don't know anything about this. I haven't had a chance really to dig into it and figure out what this is, but I think the timing is curious in terms of a lot of the things that I'm thinking about up at College of the Atlantic. And then these are some great examples of, tests, answers that are really pretty phenomenal and creative, especially the elephant with the question mark. So, I mean, this is one thing that got me interested in doing this Wonder seminar at OSU was the subjectivity. I mean, artists traffic in subjectivity, and in the university and the art college, basically, we're the only department that deals with that. I would even argue versus creative writing or maybe even theater, because they're temporal. And creative writing and theater, you have rules of grammar and language. Here we have nothing. And so it's been a mission of mine to loosen people up and try and get them to be unfamiliar with the world. So this, of course, is one of the greats. As we know, there are known knowns. There are things we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns, the ones we don't know we don't know. It's an extraordinary quote. I don't know if he was really thinking about the Johari window, but it's interesting to think about that in relation to this particular diagram. So like I was talking about, everybody's coming at the world through their own experience. And in the exhibition at Mass MoCA, we were hoping that there would be enough work, there's 23 artists in the group show, that it would trigger some kind of reaction in someone along the way. And the way that we interpret the same thing in a multitude of ways is always fascinating, interesting. I put this in here just to talk about retinal fatigue and the fact that our brains are constantly trying to catch up. I think this is a good analogy for when I'm talking about a wonder moment, the experience of wonder, where cognitively, and I am not the psychologist here, thank goodness there is one, but this is just through my own observations of being an artist and a curious person in the world and wondering. Retinal fatigue sets in, and your brain starts substituting, trying to understand. You start seeing colors. All of these other things are not being processed in any sort of way that conforms to your normal day, in the way that you go about doing things. This is Dolly drawing in the bathtub. I put this in after reading Deirdre's book. And his paranoid critical method, where, this was one of this, he wrote this amazing book on like 50 techniques of craftsmanship, and this is one where you start finding images and things, and of course there's the village, and it's turned on the side, and then that's the photograph, and then that's his drawing of it. So it's about trying to see the world in a different place, in a different way, not in a different place, excuse me. And I think that these dream states that Deirdre is going to be talking about, I think there's some relationship there. Maybe wonder is the waking part, the analog to dreams. When I dream and I wake up and it doesn't make sense, that's the same experience I'm having when I have a moment of wonder. Wonder also precedes knowledge. So after wonder, after you experience something truly wonderful, then curiosity kicks in. That's when you start learning about things. I'm going to pass on this because I'm worried about time. Conditions of wonder. Wonder is a form of learning, an intermediate, highly particular state akin to a sort of suspension of the mind between ignorance and enlightenment that marks the end of unknowing and the beginning of knowing. This is from the seminar room. I've taught this course maybe 3 times at OSU, and I'm teaching it up at COA right now for the undergrads. And we would just have discussions all the time, trying to map out what is wonder, what are the conditions of wonder. Can you make something that's wonderful? I don't think you can. It's a difficult prospect. So in doing so, what I came up with was the grotesque is, a form or a strategy or a method of making. I mean, that's something that artists can do. You can take disparate materials, move them together. The conditions of wonder are below. Play is the process of making it happen. And then we go to this diagram here. And so we start at the left, we go through, there's a material experience, conceptual experience at the top, wonder's in the middle, and then these conditions of wonder off to the left are really interesting to me, especially like the fantastic, like a hesitation. The fantastic, according to Todorov, is when you are hesitating between a supernatural and an unnatural explanation in something. And the most common example that I give that most people have seen is the movie The Sixth Sense. Right before you start to or Bruce Willis starts to understand that he's indeed dead. This is a great quote by Deleuze on the middles, on middle gaps. And I will just quickly, wonder, as most people consider it, the aurora borealis. And then also situations like the 9/11 and the collapse of the towers for me. That's when I realized that there was some relationship to horror or the horrible in wonder. I just had no idea what was going to happen. Wonder and dreaming. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to let you read this because I know we're speeding along. And I'm just trying to provide material here basically for our discussion. This is my piece in the exhibition. This is the thing that I'm dealing with constantly that I don't understand, like what's going on with me, and working with like depression as a subject matter and so on and so forth. So it's this great mystery, and it's this occasion to really reinvent the way that I experience and I move through and know the world. This is another example that I give to my students all the time, and another analogy for wonder, the state of flow. Charles Fort, who's an interesting character that I'm happy to talk more about. This is a fade, this is a painting, Luke Toyman's, taken from a film still, merging between a body of water and a face. So these transitional moments where you are, you're terrified and you're mystified, but then something kicks in and you want to explore further, and I'm going to read this. This is my last slide. I'm going to read this as a segue. This is by Tom Robbins, and it's as if it's a waking dream. Suppose you awoke one morning with the uneasy feeling that the world had, while you slept, somehow slipped a tilt and rose to find that your dresser drawers were mysteriously open a fraction of an inch, and that prescription bottles had tipped over in the medicine cabinet, although neither you nor anyone else in your household had ventured since bedtime to get an aspirin, a condom, or a Tums, and that pictures on your wall, shades on the lamp, and books in the case were askew. Outdoors, the taller buildings were posing ala Pisa, or should you live in the country, streams were running slightly outside their grooves as fruit dropped like gargoyle ganglia from uniformly leaning trees. What would be your reaction to such a phenomenon? Honestly now, and seriously too, how would you feel? Would you be scared, confused, puzzled, and anxious? Would you telephone the police? Would you pray? Or would you numbly await an explanation, refusing to attempt to analyze the event or even experience it with your full emotions until you had read the papers, tuned in the news, heard how experts from the university were explaining the tilt, learned how the Pentagon planned to deal with it, were reassured by the president, who might insist, as presidents will, that nothing had gone wrong, or instead of fear, bewilderment, and anxiety, or in addition to fear, bewilderment, and anxiety, or instead of a hard impulse to dismiss the happening and get back to business as usual, or in addition to a hard impulse to dismiss the happening and get back to business as usual, do you imagine that a bright trace of delight, unnameable and indefensible, might tickle your spine? Could you feel in an odd way elated? Elated perhaps because in a rational world where even disasters are familiar and damn near routine, something of an almost fairy tale flavor had occurred. Thank you.
So I believe that dreams are basically thinking in a very different biochemical state, and that much of our dream content is obviously the personal, emotional sorts of content that most dream books are about. But I've become very interested in the fact that our professional, objective sorts of pursuits also show up in dreams from time to time. And obviously, not all examples of creative dreams are visual art. In fact, probably the most famous of all time is when August Kekule had discovered what the atoms in the benzene molecule were, but at that time, all known molecules were some kind of straight line with side chains off it, and it didn't make any sense for the properties of benzene. Anyway, he was trying to arrange it, and he dozed and he saw atoms gambling in front of his eyes, was his phrase, and the atoms formed snakes. And then one of the snakes, but this is a snake made of atoms, reached around and took its tail in its mouth, and he woke up and realized that benzene had to be a closed ring. And that's sort of the all-time most famous creative dream. But any type of problem has occasionally been solved in a dream, but there are two areas that are the most likely. One is a problem that demands thinking outside the box, where the person is stuck exactly because the conventional wisdom is wrong. And the second is those that benefit from very vivid hallucinatory level visualization. And this corresponds very much with what we know about what the dreaming brain looks like differently from the waking brain. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, yes, that is lighting up, which is just behind our foreheads, is damped way down. So we're not censoring things, not just in the Freudian sense of no, that's not socially appropriate, but also in the sense of not saying, oh, that's not the right way to do that. That's not how you approach that problem. The kind of expert is not kicking in and weeding out far-flung ideas. And then the secondary visual cortex is more active, and this is where the visual imagination lies. So it's much more hyped up than in a normal waking state. And Kekule's discovery is really an example of both of these qualities, of needing to think outside the box and of vivid visualization helping. But this evening I want to focus on the visual arts. And because of the extremely visual nature of dreaming, art has received the most inspiration. When I ask professionals if they've ever had useful help from their dreams, the one profession where the vast majority say yes is visual art. It's about 50% for novelists and poets, and then it drops on down. No profession does everyone say no. Mathematics, anything, you can find examples, but visual art is at the very top. And some anthropologists believe that the more surreal cave paintings, such as this antlered humanoid, may represent dreams, and if so, people have been painting their dreams for as long as there's any record of art. And throughout art history, this has continued. The Romantics made a lot of use of their dreams. William Blake painted biblical and mythical dream scenes, but because he had a lot of flying dreams himself, he often had flying figures in these dream scenes that weren't actually in the original dream he was undertaking to depict. And similarly, Edward Burne-Jones says about his picture, The Rose Bower, which was for a Snow White series, very much illustrating the Snow White story, that he was trying to depict the light the way he always saw it in his own dreams, that in his dreams light was diffuse and soft and coming from no particular source. So even though it's the Sleeping Beauty scene, it's Burne-Jones' own sense of the way dreams look. And the Salvador Dali explicitly promoted dreams as a rich source of content. And another of the tricks in the Secrets of Mastercraft, 50 Secrets of Master Craftsmanship, that Sean already mentioned. This is an illustration from a technique that he advised to capture hypnagogic sleep onset dreams, and he said that you should start off fairly sleepy in a very comfortable armchair, preferably Spanish, and you should hold a key over a fine china plate, preferably Spanish, but it works with a koan over any hard floor. Basically, many people have picked up on this. So you let yourself sit, getting sleepier and sleepier, holding the key or the koan or anything works, and let yourself doze off. And at just the moment that you're getting into the hypnagogic state and imagery is forming in your mind's eye, you lose muscle tone and the key drops down and wakes you up so that you capture and recall those sleep onset dreamy images that would otherwise be lost forever as you drift into deeper sleep. And this is his dream caused by the flight of a bee around a pomegranate, which was obtained that way. And he had dozed off this way after eating part of a pomegranate that was sitting there. Upon awakening, there was a bee flying around it, but in his imagery, he had seen a golden fish flying around it that then turned into a tiger flying around it. That's what he recorded as the dream. The naked, probably his wife, and the elephant in the background are not in the account, so whether he didn't mention them or whether they're both just images in lots of his paintings that he added is not very clear. Surrealist Leonora Carrington also painted her dreams. This is her, and then we met the daughter of the Minotaur, and her White People of Danath Danan. And Carrington's best friend, Remedios Varro, also painted many of her dreams. This is The Creation of Birds. And this is Varro's Cat Ferns. See the cute little, someone should animate that. Artist Jim Ann Howard, who used to be Boston-based but has moved off to Swanee, Tennessee, has a recurring nightmare, which always starts that she's in a room reading. She loves to read. And she looks up and she notices that the walls seem a little closer. She's very claustrophobic in waking life, but always at the start of the dream, she kind of suspects that, but she dismisses it and goes back to reading, and she looks up and the walls really are closer, and the walls really are closer and closer and closer, and they're squeezing in on her as she wakes up in horror. She just calls that one self-portrait, but that's her recurring nightmare. And then Tabitha Weaver, who is a Cambridge and Cape-based painter, collected other people's flying dreams for a 3-year series of about 60 paintings, all of which have the written dream account from the person at the bottom, and then Tabitha's painting depicting the dream at the top. And this is another one from that series. And then this one is Tabitha's own, in which she not only flew, but she was running a flying school for babies and toddlers, where they used parachutes at first, kind of like training wheels, and that's Tabitha in the striped sweater teaching them how to do this. And Richard Russo, the photographer, not the writer, of course, photoshops photos for his dreams. And the first here was a dream of seeing a spider web and realizing that it was exactly the Minotaur's maze that you wandered around and got lost in. And he took a real photograph of a spider web and very carefully moved the little segments around to create that. And the second is a dream in which he was walking in the woods and he came upon a grove of trees that were simultaneously trees, but also the members of his dream group were trees at the same time. And now we're moving on to completely amateur art. This piece is mine, and I cannot draw, and I used to frustrate myself waking up from dream images that I just so wanted to drag into the waking world, and I absolutely could not do that with my hand-eye coordination. So I eventually discovered that I take enough photos, I like taking photos, and if I heavily digitally manipulate them, that I can get at something that at least partially captures something I've seen in a dream, enough that it's satisfying. This is a dream of going into Harvard Square and discovering that they're strange little creatures that live up on the rooftops and only come out at night. And in dream thinking, I wasn't thinking they were suddenly there for the first time. I was like, oh, wow, they've been here all this time and I've never looked up and watched them. And then by the end of the dream, they sort of seem to be all over, down at street level, taking over the square. More than one artist has told me that when they manage to have a lucid dream, a dream where you know you're dreaming while you're dreaming, that what they choose to do is to try to see some of their future art. And various ones do that somewhat differently, but this is local artist Paul Lawfully says that he always simply decides he's going to go to an exhibit of his new art, and a street appears and a gallery door appears and he walks into an art gallery, and there will always be sculpture and or paintings in pretty much the style and medium in which he works, things that he would technically know how to do, somewhat in his style, but all new pieces that he hasn't thought up, and that he always wakes up and sketches frantically and ends up making many of them, not necessarily every piece in every lucid dream show. And I also wanted to mention that lots of dream-named art has nothing to do with an actual dream. This is something that keeps getting in dream books. The Palais Ideal, which gets translated in English as the Dream Palace, and it was carved by a French postman named Ferdinand Cheval, and it was shortly before the Surrealists, and they really loved this and sort of took him as one of the early pre-Surrealists. But he clearly described imagining it as he made his postal routes, that every time he walked past this soft sandstone formation, that he would picture how it could be turned into a building and what the irregular things could become, and that he just planned it out over time as he walked past this thing over and over. Nothing to do with the dream, even though it looks dreamy. And similarly, René Magritte's The Reckless Sleeper makes it into many dream art books as a dream art example, and Magritte is one of the few surrealists who says that he never used dreams in his work and very carefully planned out his surrealist things. So The Reckless Sleeper you could think of as being about dreams perhaps, but it's not from a dream. And even the cover of my book for the topic of dreams and creativity, Random House and I ended up picking this Shigeru Matsuzaki scene because it so represented the idea of the Committee of Sleep, of this sort of wacky collection of different parts of yourself that think about and plan and come up with fairly different solutions by night than you might by day. But when I finally met Matsuzaki and got to ask him if any of his images, all of which I like, are from dreams, he doesn't speak very much English, but his answer was something like, no, my dream's bad. My dreams all, I use brush and the bristles fall out in the paint. No, I know use my dreams. He, like Sean, is in that minority that don't tend to paint from their dreams. So there's not necessarily a one-to-one correlation with things looking dreamlike versus being from a dream. And last, the converse is true. This is illustrating in the opposite direction. Jasper John's career really took off after he dreamed of painting a giant American flag. And he woke up and he painted the giant American flag, and then he painted variations on the giant American flag, and he had been completely unknown before his giant American flag series, and that put him on the map. And at least to my eye, that is the least dreamlike painting I've ever seen, but it came straight out of a dream. So dreams inspire some, some very realistic looking art, as well as certainly some dreamy oniric art comes from very planful waking things. But there's still a strong relationship, and we'll talk about this more once the three of us are sitting down, but when Sean and I were talking, we certainly came up with the idea that there are a lot of relations between wonder, which is sort of his favorite topic, and dreams, which are mine. I think sometimes the state of wonder happens in dreams, that sometimes our dreaming self might have that wonder face that he was showing, even though our waking sleeping has lost all muscle tone. But also, sometimes because of that prefrontal cortex being damped down that I showed you, we're not struck with wonder by some very awesome, unique, either horror, scary, or beautiful, gorgeous object. In the dream, we kind of take it for granted, and it's as soon as we wake up that we have the wonder reaction at the image. And I was struck that Sean put the Frankenstein image up in his slides as sort of the epitome of the horror version of wonder. And Mary Shelley dreamed the two key scenes of Frankenstein. Probably a lot of you know this story, but she was at Lord Byron's villa. They were telling ghost stories near bedtime. And Byron, at the end of the evening, said that they should all write their own ghost story, meaning over the next few weeks. And she went to bed and she dreamed the scene where the scientist is trying to bring the monster to life with electricity and thinks he's failed, and then the scene where the monster comes and stands over the bed and actually has come to life. And those are really like the two key moments in it. And then she created the rest of the plot around it. And she was pregnant with, she was 19, she was pregnant with Shelley's child. They had not been planning to have a child. So the idea of a kind of wondrous, monstrous creature that you were creating had a lot of just Freudian psychodynamic sort of meaning, but it combined with Byron's challenge to write a ghost story to sort of make one of the all-time, most popular novels. And it is sort of the epitome of wonder, but those images are straight from a dream. So I think at this point, I'm going to stop talking, and we're all three going to talk to each other and to and with you.